Hi, this is Chuck Trawick of Infotronics again. This is a continuation of Part 1, SharePoint Designer 2013. The slide that you see in front of you is what we talked about at the beginning of the last session, the SharePoint 2013 Management Shell PowerShell command you need to run. You'll see on the right-hand side, after you install Workflow Manager, you should see, if you're in a single server environment, Workflow Manager and Workflow Manager Client installed, and then you would run this command you see in the lower left here. So let's jump over to the virtual machine. So here we are in SharePoint 2012, and I'm going to bring up the environment, and we have created a site over here. And in this site we have created some promoted links, and this example is out on the SharePoint development team blog that we're going to walk through. I'm going to pick this plain item event list, and I'm going to edit this particular item, and you will see that basically we just have a very simple list that has some pretty static data in it, a couple of addresses and so forth. So this list was created with the intent that people would want to schedule an event, have it approved, and get some notifications about what to do and how to do it. So let me leave this running for a minute, and I'm going to go down here on my taskbar, and I'm going to start up SharePoint Designer 2013. I've previously been into that site, so you'll see here it's on my task pane. So I'm going to bring up SharePoint 2013 with this particular event site, and it's just going to take a little minute here to retrieve the data from the site. And here I am in the new 2013 interface. So if I come over here to on the left-hand navigation pane and I pick Workflows, as it retrieves the data that are bound, workflows that are bound to that site, it's going to list them here for me. And you see that I have two. This event workflow 2 is a pre-populated one that's already in place, but I'm going to create a new one based on the event list so we can walk through a few of these exercises. I'm going to call it Event Workflow 3. Now, I had mentioned in the last video that you'll have two styles of workflows. So if you install the Workflow Manager properly, you will see that you have a SharePoint 2013 choice along with a SharePoint 2010 choice. In our case here, if I can type right, we're going to do SharePoint 2013 workflow. And as it brings up the display here, you'll see that we have several different methods up here that we can use, and I'm going to go over here and change my view to the Visual Designer. But before I do that, I'm going to come out of this display and start up Visio 2013 to show you what we talked about in the last session. So we talked about the accounts payable example. Now in this example here, I'm going to bring up Visio 2013 and I'm going to use the Microsoft SharePoint 2013 workflow template. I'm going to use US units, and now you'll see that it's graphical in nature, and action conditions and components are over here on my left, and I have a design surface here on my right. So what I want to do is I want to change this, and let's zoom it back a little bit, and I'm going to come over here on the Process tab, and I'm going to create a stage outline. Now remember, we talked about a stage is where you place all of your activity. So any actions that you create, any conditions and so forth are all going to live inside of a stage. So there we have a stage. And I want to add a condition, because when somebody comes in here and they request a workflow, we then need to do something, make a condition based on the results of that. And then we want to come back and do something with that. So we're going to put a few more things on here that I'll explain in just a minute. So we know we're going to have several stages here of things that we want to do. And this, as you can see, could be easily done by a non-technical person. So if I zoom this back up, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say request event approval, like so. Then I'm going to say, what does this condition do? I'm going to say is event approved, question mark. Right here we're going to say approved. Right here we're going to say get weather. We're going to call a weather service through that new web service command we talked about, and forecast the weather for a few days ahead of time. Right here we're going to send an email. Then we're going to update that we notified the user. And then over here, this is going to be if it's rejected. So in a couple minutes we have a pretty simple thing, right? So now, like all Visio diagrams, they need to be connected. So I'm going to take this to this, this to this, this to this, and this to this. So pretty simple. All right, so now I think that I have this laid out, but I need to actually give a little bit more information. So I'm going to come into my diagram again, and I'm going to put some call-outs in here. Well, let's go here. And to help people better understand it, so I'm going to say event was scheduled and forward. Let's see. This is the event request. This is was event approved. And right here we're going to put a call out, and that's going to be was approved. And up here we're going to say it was rejected. Okay, so if I zoom this back, now we can kind of get a pretty good idea of a simple process here. So I want to save this because now I think I have something that works. I'm going to put it on my desktop, and I already have one there that I'm going to overwrite. And now I want to share this. And so I'm going to send an email to my IT person, which will be me. And send it. And so that will take a minute or so. And now that I have done that, I'm really finished with Visio. So let's go over here and see if in the email client on my local machine, if we got a notice on that. And there we got a notice, and there's the Visio interface file. So I'm going to go back to the virtual machine, and now I'm going to open up SharePoint Designer again and my site again. So I could have opened that file, the Visio file, directly, but over on the Workflow tab, I'm now going to go out and import from Visio my diagram. And if I go to the desktop, you'll see that we have the Visio diagram, and I'm going to call this Event Workflow 3. It's a list workflow, as you can see here, and we have the multiple types that we can configure, and it's going to be bound to the event list. So it's going to open that and bring in the drawing just as it was left. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit here, and you'll see that there's all of the things that we had. So now I think that I can generate a workflow from this. And by the way, these actions over here inside of SPD are dynamic. So based on the type of workflow, these are going to change. So let's generate this outline. Whoops, had an error. So it's saying that that shape is not connected. So I'm going to bring up the connector tool, and I'm going to connect it. And let's try that again. And so I know from doing this for more times than I count that one of the problems is that I have to identify what this choice is here. So I'm going to right click the yes branch and pick yes, and I'm going to right click the no branch and click no. And now let's see if we get a little further. And let's see what that's highlighting. So I'm going to grab this connector tool here and see if that does it. So here we are having the shape now connected all the way through. I no longer need to have this check diagram dialog, so I'm going to get rid of it. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and I'm going to take and drop an action in this box. So if I come down here under actions, I want to find a start a task process right here. I'm going to drag this and drop it in here. And I'm going to use this little property dialog, and I'm going to change the settings here, and you'll see that it gives me a wizard, and I can change the properties as you see here. So what I'm going to do at this point here is I'm going to zoom back out a little bit more, and let's come over here a little bit and come in a little more. So there's our basic workflow that we started. And just so we can understand what's going to happen, I'm going to switch now to the text-based designer. And you will see that all of those stages have now created for us. So basically all we did was we left those two connector points off from the Visio creation tool and brought them directly into SharePoint Designer. So you can see with minimal training, we'll be able to take someone who knows a process, get them spun up on Visio 2013, and just with a few simple commands, they can lay out what they want. Obviously, we can iterate if it's more complex. But here we have a wizard, right? So I'm going to come in here and populate this wizard. And you'll see that when I select the participants, I have a lot of choices. I'm going to send this to Kate, and this is event approval request. And I could send these, let's say we had a 3-step approval process, I could put 3 people in here or a group, and when I did that, the first person would get an email, the second 2 would not. The second person would get an email after the first person approved it. If the first person rejected it, it would not be forwarded to the second person. In our case here, and this is all in the wizard, we didn't have to code this up, I'm going to pick parallel. I could look at the editor of that. I don't really need one. And you'll see that I have different options here. What's the due date? I'll pick today. And what are my task options? I want a task created for each member within the group. In this case, it'll just be 1. I want to wait for a task to be completed. But I don't want to wait for all. I'll have this workflow wake up and resume when we get the first response. What do we want this to be associated with? If you haven't used Designer before, the workflow engine has something called context. It knows that an event was fired of some sort and what the current item that this is attached to is. So when I pack it up, I'm going to pick current item. So we've attached our item to that, and then these are my email options. And you'll see that I can look at the email that's going to be generated. I can modify this. We'll do that in a minute. And I could send reminders and pick the frequency and the number of times that I want that to occur with. And these are my outcomes that I can test for. If you haven't used content types before, that's a very important concept. In this case here, I'm taking the default one. I'm going to have task outcome, and I'm going to default that to approved. So now we've populated this. So now I want to check that condition. And you'll see that we are inside of a stage, and that stage was created originally in Visio, and that's the name that was created. So now we're in IT. IT is going to say, we want to look for that value. When that value is created, that Outlook value, there's several things that we can select to pull data from. The task created a task outcome in a memory variable, and memory variables are stored here in the workflow variables section. So I pick that section. Then within that section right now, I only have one variable called outcome. So I'm going to place it here, and I'm going to test for 2 conditions, approved or not. Then I'm going to go to approved. When it's approved, I'm going to do something here and go to weather, and then I'm going to send an email, and so on, all through these stages. And we can save and publish this workflow. So I wanted you to see how that process worked. I'm going to stop at this point, and in the next section we're going to pull up one that's completed and run through it and explain it.